Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be discussing this video that we're looking at on the screen right here. This is one that I released on the body camera channel a few days ago, and it's one where it says a white guy was beat up and arrested after using racial slurs. The reason I'm making this video right now is because this is going to be a video where I respond to the comments. It's not going to be like your normal responding to the comments video. I'm not going to screenshot them and put them up on the screen, and I'm not here to ridicule people who are making comments on this video. Today is going to be actually more of a polite version of responding to the comments, because I think that the majority of, and when I respond to comments, I'm responding to negative comments. And I think it's important to notice that a couple things about the comment sections of YouTube videos. There's always a negative comment bias that, you're more likely to comment on a video if you have negative emotions towards that video. People are less likely to post positive comments on videos. That's just kind of how social media works. And then the other part of that is that especially as a creator, or someone that has like some emotion or something kind of tied to the video or the channel, you also tend to key in on the negative comments and stuff. So what we're doing today is we're responding to some of the negative comments that were left on this video, but I do want to mention that the majority of the comments were not negative. I think the majority of the people watching that video saw it in a very similar way that I saw it. Maybe not through the same lens, but they kind of had the same emotions through the video that I had when I watched it. And that was kind of what I was expecting. Some of the negative comments, well, at least one, we're going to go over them in a moment. But at least the first one I did see coming. That was kind of obvious and inevitable. And we'll address that in a moment. The other two, I was really surprised about. So the three comments are, these are three generalized comments that I saw repeated a handful of times on the video. I don't know how many comments it has. Does YouTube tell you? Oh, 785 comments. So of the 785 comments that are on this video, then when you take like the negative 10% comments that were on there, they're pretty much equally divided into these three segments. The first one was people were saying, it's not against the law to use racial slurs. He shouldn't have been arrested for using racial slurs. That was the first comment that I got on the video. That is a giant misunderstanding of what actually happened this day. The second one that really kind of caught me off guard was people saying that the officer was threatening to beat up a handcuffed prisoner and that they were violating his rights by doing that. We're going to go over that. I'm going to show you the part of the video that they were talking about when they made that comment. And then the third one was at the end of this video, or really close to the end, pretty much the end of the video, when the officer puts the suspect in the car, he yells and screams at him and tells him to shut the F up. That was a part when I watched the original raw footage. I thought that was glorious. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, bravo. I was excited for the officer that gave this guy a piece of his mind. And I thought that was going to be extremely well received. As it turns out, that part of the video was absolutely not well received. People thought that the officer was unhinged, that he let his emotions get the better part of him, that he couldn't control himself, that he couldn't remove his personal feelings from the situation. And they were saying things like the officer needs to be arrested and put in jail for the way he treated this guy. And other people were saying that he needs to be fired, that he's unfit for duty. These comments are all absolutely ridiculous. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them kind of one at a time and talk about them, give you my explanation as to what I think about these comments, and provide you with the perspective of an actual police officer when you see these things. Because I have been in all of these situations before, maybe not with the racial stuff. I don't think I've ever arrested anyone that was entangled in like a racial slur incident, but definitely the handcuff guy saying, if you spit on me, I'll punch you in the face. And then also just yelling and screaming at people. These are things that I have done. So the first one, and I'm just going to do this just in the interest of simplicity and time, I'm going to use my editing software a little bit here. So the first thing that I want to address is, was this guy arrested for using racial slurs? No, he was not arrested for using racial slurs. He was arrested because he had a machete and he was threatening to cut people's heads off with a machete. That's the reason he was arrested. And another thing that I saw is, well, you don't deserve to get beat up because you used racial slurs. And I want to remind everybody that that's not why he got beat up either. If you watch the video, maybe it was hard for you to kind of pay attention to some of the details, but we talked to this witness right here, and the other witnesses corroborated the story. This was a situation where he had this guy right here that got beat up. He was out in the hallway, and he lives in a building that's filled with primarily black people, primarily African-American neighbors live in this building. He was out in the hallway yelling and screaming at them, yelling racial slurs at them. One guy, I can't remember if it made it into my edit that I put on YouTube, but said that he actually brought a noose over to him and was hanging it in his face and calling him the N-word and all this other stuff. So what happened as a consequence of that is that this guy from down the hall came out in the hallway and was like, dude, you can't do that. You can't use that kind of language. That's foul. That's wrong. Like, don't talk to the people this way. And, you know, these guys are both incredibly intoxicated, mind you. So we'll call this guy Whitey, and we'll call the other guy Scott, because I think that was his name. Whitey looks at Scott and says, don't tell me what to do. I'll talk to these N-words the way I want. And then he charges at him. And that's when... And this is in the video. Maybe I'll clip it and I'll stick it in right here. So Whitey charges at Scott, and Scott got the better hand of him. Scott beat him up. and that's when all of the black residents of the apartment complex kind of jumped on the pile, separated these two men. Because if you were watching the video, you heard them both say they got jumped by a large group of people. Scott was here saying, look, I'm from Cleveland. I'm not from Columbus. I don't even know these people. Those are all his friends, and they jumped in and they beat me up. And this guy was saying, oh, all of the black people in apartment 22 beat me up. The reason that they were saying such different versions of the story is because they're so drunk they don't know what's going on. But that's the fact of the matter. So this guy was out in the hallway using racial slurs. This guy came and told him to stop using racial slurs. So Whitey charged as Scott. Scott beat the crap out of Whitey. And then Whitey went into his apartment, got this machete, came out in the hallway with it, and was threatening to cut people's head off. That is what he got arrested for. He was not arrested for using racial slurs. He was actually not even beat up for using racial slurs. He was beat up because someone told him to stop using those words. He attacked that person and he lost that fight. That's what actually happened on this incident. I hope you guys are able to kind of understand how all that went down. Now, the next part of the video that people took exception with was when the officer was searching him out by the cruiser. You know, they already made the decision to arrest him. They go down, they put him in cuffs, they walk him out to the cruiser. They're standing by the cruiser, and the officer says, you know, you need to look to your left. And if you spit on that officer to your left, or you spit on me, I'm going to punch you in the face. That part was the way people took exception to that. I find kind of amusing. The reason I find it amusing is because they're not telling the truth about what's actually going on here. And then I also saw some people that were saying, you know, a police officer should never threaten anybody. That's out of hand. You know, some of the people that were saying that, I look at their accounts and I had the impression that they were kind of like little old ladies, like nice little old ladies. And I understand their perspective, but I don't think they understand what it's like to be a police officer and have somebody spit blood on you. Let's go ahead, and just so that we're all on the same page, I'm going to go ahead and play that part of the video for you. And then we'll, after it's all fresh in our minds, we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, well, I'm done with you tonight, that's for sure. You got anything in your pockets?
No, sir.
Look to your left. You spit on him or you spit on me, I'm punching you in the face. You understand me?
I understand, officer.
Switch me. Look to your right. Yeah, it's mine.
All right, I think that's enough of that part of the video that we can kind of discuss it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to play it again, but I'm going to come back to right here. You can kind of tell in the still shot. It's even difficult to see in the video unless you have been in this situation, you actually know what's going on. But remember, this video that you watched that was 15-20 minutes, I can't remember how long it was actually a 47-minute incident. And I had to take the 47 minutes and try to chop it down into something digestible that people would actually watch on YouTube and would actually be entertained by. So the officers were standing there listening to this guy run his suck, his racist language and his stupidity and all this stuff for 47 minutes. Then they finally got someone to say, you know what, I will cooperate. I will fill out a witness statement. I will testify against this guy in court. That gave these guys the probable cause to go ahead and place him under arrest. They got him under arrest. They're walking him out to the cruiser. This part right here is hard to tell in the video, especially if you don't know what you're looking at, but he's actually being resistant. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? He's being difficult right now. He's offering a little bit of passive resistance as they're walking out to the car. The reason that I can say that is because you can see that his feet are out in front of him and the officers are behind him. Their perspective is a little bit back. His feet are way out in front. That is a signal to me that he's intentionally putting his feet out in front of him to slow down their pace, and they're having to push him along. So he is actually passively resisting them all the way out to the car. If he wasn't, this would have been a lot more smooth. It wouldn't have been choppy, and you actually wouldn't have been able to see his body in the camera. That's how this stuff works, because the officer would have just been able to walk simply beside him. They would have walked out the car. That would have been it. But he's actually offering passive resistance. So the officers sat there for 47 minutes and talked to this guy. He was lying to them, being belligerent. He was denying that he went out and got a machete and was trying to fight people, that he was threatening to cut their heads off, all this other stuff. He's incredibly drunk and he's bleeding, and now he's offering passive resistance. You get out to the car, you go to search him. This is the instance where you're as close to him as you'll ever be during this entire incident. This is the situation where drunk people just like him that are already offering passive resistance and have this like defiant streak in them. This is the kind of situation where as a police officer, you get spit on. As a police officer, when you're in this situation, you kind of know what's coming. You kind of know what's going on in this person's head. I'm not saying 100% that this guy is considering spitting on the police officer, but as a police officer who's been in this situation many, many times, in the back of your head, you're afraid that that's what he's thinking about because it's happened so many times, if you know what I'm saying. So what the officer does is he says something to try to dissuade him from spitting. He basically says, listen, if you're thinking about spitting on me, you don't want to do that, because if you do, you're going to experience a tremendous amount of physical pain. The way he does this is he says, if you spit on me or my partner, I'm going to punch you in the face. Now that is not the same as just threatening to beat up a handcuffed prisoner. He's saying, don't spit on me. He's just trying to convince him not to do it. This is not a big deal. This is verbal de-escalation, believe it or not. Often as a police officer, you might threat to use force against somebody in order to prevent them from responding against you. I've done this on many occasions. I'll point a gun at people and I'll say, if you move, I'm going to blow your effing head off. Do I have any intention of actually blowing this person's head off? No, but I want them to believe that if they flinch, they're going to die because I don't want them to flinch. I want them to be 100% cooperative with me, and I want them to literally fear for their life. That will make them cooperate. These are in extreme circumstances, right? Situations where you think somebody might spit on you. I might have actually said, I'll punch you. But generally speaking, especially when you get by the cruiser, we can kind of show this here. You're standing next to the cruiser. You got the guy's hands behind his back, and he's giving you indications that he's about to spit on you. Generally, I'll say something, like, if you spit on me, your face is going to get caved in on the front of my car, or, you're going to eat the pavement, or, something like that. But this is verbal de-escalation. That's all it is. It's not a threat. It's not a criminal threat. He didn't violate his rights by threatening to harm him. he was telling him that if you spit on me, I will justifiably use force against you. There's nothing wrong with that. People need to understand that. This is part of being a police officer when you're arresting a drunk, violent suspect. The guy had a machete. This isn't just like some peaceful dude that was sitting around meditating and the officers went out and arrested him. He had a machete and he was threatening to cut people's heads off. This is a violent individual. You also have to remember that these officers kind of know this guy. This is their first time interacting with him, and they know his history. You have to take that into account, and you as the viewer, you're not aware of that kind of stuff. So I think that's all I want to say about that particular part of the video. Now, the next part of the video is this part here where they have him at the car. I've got it right here. They've got him in the car. They put him in the car, and once he's in the car and seatbelted in, the officer just starts screaming at him, screams at him, tells him to shut the F up, slams the door on him. The people that took exception to this, there was a few. There's a few that were unexpected. You know, I expect the people that normally call officers tyrants and say ACAB and all the other stuff, I expect them to leave negative comments on this kind of stuff. But this particular video, part of the video, I had comments from people that generally I don't see negative comments from. This tells me that this is something that I need to address. I need to explain. So before I do that, just like we did with the part of the video prior to this, we're going to watch this particular part of the video, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to explain what's happening from an officer's perspective.
Okay. You didn't have a right to hit me in the neck.
I gotta make sure you don't have any drugs inside you.
Careful.
Watch your head.
Watch it.
Get your feet in there.
I'm trying to.
Get your feet in there.
I'm trying to.
Get your feet in
Let
there.
me get my ass in here first.
I have African American family and friends.
So do
I personally find it
two.
offensive. Your language and your attitude.
I
So
have
you need to
two
do me a
half
favor
daughters.
and shut the fuck up.
I have 2 half daughters.
The comments about this were very wide ranging. They were saying, you know, the officer shouldn't have lost his cool. We expect our officers to be more professional. Then we also saw a lot of comments from people saying, this guy is completely unhinged. He should not have a badge and a gun. This is terrifying. He's a liability to his community. I'm trying to think of the order that I should kind of address these things. Firstly, as far as the officer being unhinged, I'm just going to say, well, there's 2 things I want to say about this. There's a variety of things. Before I get into the explanation, I do want to say that, of course, you know, the officer's not supposed to be yelling at people this way. This is considered rude and discourteous behavior. This is not what police officers are supposed to be doing. This is wrong. If this was reviewed by a supervisor at the time, he probably got pulled aside, had a little note written about him that says, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this way. And he said, you know what, I'm sorry. And he signed it, and it went in his file. Is it the wrong thing to do? Sure, it's the wrong thing to do. Is it a big deal? No, it's not a big deal. And that is kind of where I want to get into the next part, right? People were saying that he's completely unhinged, lost control of his emotions, and he's dangerous. That's what people are saying. He needs to be taken off the street and put on desk duty because of this. What actually happened here was, you know, he had a guy that was passively resisting, putting his feet out, resisting, walking out to the car, has been drunk and belligerent and everything this entire time. He went out and he searched that guy. While he was searching him, did he, or even when he put him in handcuffs, I don't have that tape ready to go, but if you remember, he went down the stairs, he grabbed him, he spun around, put him in cuffs, and then they walked out to the car. Did he use any unreasonable amount of force at any point in time during that arrest? Did he, like I would say that somebody that's unhinged and their emotions got the better of them. If he walked down, he would have grabbed that guy and slammed him down on the ground. Maybe when he was handcuffing him, shove him up against the wall and bounce his face off the wall. Like, these are the things that we're told happen all the time, right? And these are the things that I'm told happened back before body cameras, maybe back in the 90s when officers used to get really rough with people. They used to give people a little bit of street justice that we don't see anymore. If this officer was completely unhinged, we would have seen something like that. I'm telling you that this officer is 100% in control of his emotions, and this was a calculated decision on his part. And the evidence of that is the fact that while he had his hands on him, he didn't do anything to him. He didn't hurt him. He didn't twist the handcuffs. He didn't make him he didn't accidentally push the guy into the vehicle. The guy didn't accidentally trip and fall on the way out to the car. He didn't, when he was telling the guy to sit down, he could have bounced his head off the cruiser. When the guy refused to put his legs in the cruiser, he could have gone to shut his door and shut the guy's leg in the door. There are so many things that happen when an officer loses control of his emotions. This officer did not do that. He put him in the car. He yelled at him. He said, get in the car, get in the car, get in the car, get your feet in the car, get your feet in the car. That's fine. You're allowed to yell at a suspect and tell him forcefully to get in the car, as long as you're not hurting him. He put him in the car, and then he stood there not touching him, and he yelled at him. That is not someone that's not in control of their emotions. That is not somebody that's unhinged. That is not somebody that is a danger to the citizens out there. That's an officer that made a conscious decision that he was going to yell at this guy. Now, when it comes to what the officer said, when he said, I personally have black friends and family members, and I'm offended by what you said. This is my explanation for that. And that's something that if you haven't been in this situation, you're unlikely to have experienced before. But as a police officer, particularly as a white police officer, when you go into a situation with a person like this, who's a stupid, drunk racist, and they are in a conflict with a bunch of black people, this guy was sitting here thinking, I don't have any allies. I'm here all alone. Then he sees a police officer, and he sees a white police officer, and his mind automatically goes to the message that BLM is putting out there and the rest of the ignorant 1% of our population has got out there. And that message is that white police officers are racist. So you got this dumbass white racist dude, and he sees a white police officer. He's like, oh, thank God, somebody who thinks like me. He is my savior. I walk up to that guy and I start talking to him, trying to get the situation, the scenario, the story of what's going on. He starts spewing his racist stuff. I don't confront him right then and there about his ignorant racism. I want him to believe that we're allies. I want him to believe that we're friends because I want him to continue talking. I want him to feel comfortable talking to me, and the best thing that I can do is just kind of smile and nod, kind of go along with his stupid game. I won't say anything that would necessarily cause him to believe that I'm on his side, but I also won't say anything to cause him to believe that I vehemently disagree with him. I want to get cozy with this guy. It's kind of gross. It's kind of disgusting. It makes you feel creepy. An extreme example of this that I have a story about was a couple of years ago. I had a call. I don't want to necessarily get into all of the details because I'm not sure I'm allowed to, but I got a guy to admit that he was raping a 16-year-old daughter. The way that I did that is I was nice with him. I was cozy with him. I got him talking about some things that have been happening that night. Next thing you know, he's talking about his daughter. Next thing you know, he's talking about how mature she is, and talking about different body parts of his daughter, how she's developing physically. And I just said, yeah, she is growing up. She's a very mature young woman, and, she's really pretty. I don't think I said that because that's really creepy. But, you just kind of go along with what this guy's saying. And next thing you know, he's basically admitting. And the reason we had this particular story that I had, the reason we had him detained was a very minor crime. And I got him to admit to one of the worst crimes that you can possibly admit to. The way I did that is I made him feel like we were friends. Doing that it makes you feel gross inside. It makes you kind of hate yourself inside. It's absolutely disgusting. And when you do that, there's other people around watching, and they're looking at this situation and they're mortified. They're like, why is that officer being so nice to this guy? This guy is an absolute piece of filth. And that's something also that happens in environments like this, where you have a white racist guy against a whole bunch of black people. And if the officers are really nice to this white racist guy. The black people in the building will often say, see, you guys are taking his side. Why are you being so nice to him? The only reason you're arresting him is because you're taking him into protective custody. And these are literally the things that are said to us. So when the officer got him out into the car, he didn't have his hands on him, wasn't physically touching him, wasn't physically assaulting him or anything. He decided to yell at the guy, and he did that for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is that this guy was getting put into the officer's cruiser. The officer is sitting there thinking, you know what, me and this guy are going to be stuck together for the rest of the night. So far in this confrontation, he believes that I'm an ally of his. He believes that I'm on his side. He believes that I agree with his racist bullshit that he's been spewing all night. So the officer chose that opportunity to say, you know what, I don't agree with your racist bullshit. And the way he did it was said, you know, I have friends and family that are black, and I am personally offended by the stuff that's coming out of your mouth, and you can shut the fuck up. What he did is he took that friendly relationship and turned it. He doesn't want this guy to believe that they're friends. He doesn't want him to believe that they have anything in common. It's not the officer trying to get his rocks off by doing this. He's yelling at a suspect, and you yell at a suspect as a tactical decision. I believe that's what the officer was doing. The other thing is that you're putting on a show for the residents. You're making them feel comfortable. If I had a situation like this and I had two parties and I could only make one of them happy with me, and my choices were a white racist dude who had a machete or a bunch of black people that just existed in a building, and I want somebody to feel like they're getting support from the police, who do I want to project that message to? I want to project that message to those black people in the apartment that had a white racist guy threatening to cut their heads off with a machete. Do you understand where I'm coming from on this? Like, this is not an unhinged rant. This was not an emotional outburst from the officer. This was a tactical decision from the officer. He was 100% in control of himself the entire time. Now, would it be considered rude and discourteous to raise your voice at somebody and say, shut the fuck up? Yes. It's a documented constructive counseling statement that goes in your file, and it disappears after a period of time. It's not a big deal. It's the equivalent of writing somebody for a seatbelt ticket. It's really not a big deal at all. I don't want to harp on this issue too much, but there's plenty of times where I raise my voice at people, and I'm not emotional about it. I'm trying to encourage their behavior to change and trying to make something snap in their brain. Sometimes when you go from like really nice and kind to yelling and screaming at somebody, it changes levels, you know, and their brain switches from off to on. It encourages them to get up and move. And sometimes it looks incredibly mean and insensitive. I was screaming at a woman 2 days ago. It was a drug addicted prostitute that was in a dope house and got into a physical fight with some other drug addicts because somebody wasn't sharing dope. I don't remember all of the details. She was such a mess that she couldn't explain anything to me. All she kept saying was, get me an ambulance, get me an ambulance, get me an ambulance. So I got her an ambulance. While she was on the ambulance, I was out talking to witnesses and stuff and found that she was actually fairly responsible for what happened to her. Like, she was one of the instigators of the problem. But I was like, all right, she's on the ambulance. She's going to go to the hospital. She's going to be taken away from the scene. These people are going to be happy. We'll all be back at peace again. The ambulance was there for a freaking long time. And then I ended up having to get up and walk. And then we also had some other people on the street harassing us, whatever. I was like, we need to get out of this scene. There's too many people coming up to us, causing problems with us, trying to instigate us to take action and have a use of force against them. You know, some angry neighborhood type stuff, some anti-police stuff was going on. So I went over the medics and I was like, what's going on? And the medic comes out, the actual medic on the medic comes out shaking his head. He's got the computer. He's like, He's like, I tried everything I could. She refused to go to the hospital. He's like, I think she needs to go. I really want her to go to the hospital. But I can't get her to go. She's already signed the refusal form. Now I just need her to get off the truck. So I went up and I looked at her and I said, "Did you refuse care? You don't want to go to the hospital?" She sits there crying. "Yeah, I don't want to go to the hospital." And she just starts hemming and hawing. I said, "Okay, if you're not going to go to the hospital, you need to get off the ambulance now. If you want to get off the ambulance and talk to me, I'll be happy to talk to you outside, but I'm not going to talk to you here because this ambulance needs to get going because there's people that need this help." She just sat there hemming and hawing. I might need to go to the hospital, whatever. That's when I snapped. I snapped on her because I needed her to make a freaking decision right now. I'm tired of playing nice with her, tired of her hemming and hawing back and forth. So I started yelling at her. I said, "Are you going to the hospital? I need to know right now. Yes or no? Yes or no?" She's hemming and hawing. I said, "Yes or no? Give me an answer. Yes or no?" She finally said no. And I said, "Get off the medic." I said, "You need to get off the medic right now. You're wasting these guys' time. There are people that need their help. And they can't do it because you're sitting here wasting their time, hemming and hawing, when people are trying to help you. They have already given you their service. You need to get off the medic now." She got off the medic. That wasn't an emotional outburst from me. That was me changing the way I spoke to her to convey a message to get her to act in a certain way. Police officers are going to do that kind of stuff sometimes. And it's important that we realize when someone is unhinged and when they're not. And it kind of brings me back. I've mentioned this in video before. I think I mentioned a video where I said, this is why nobody takes you seriously. And this is like the boy who cried wolf scenario. They're like, "Oh, this officer used way too much force on me, excessive force, blah, blah, blah." And then you watch the video and the officer didn't even lay a hand on the person. There are going to be instances where officers lose it. I should pull it up. There was that officer in Alabama, that female officer that had the black guy on the back of the cruiser or the front of the cruiser, starts tasing him for no reason. That officer absolutely lost control. That needs to be dealt with. Those situations are going to happen, but don't compare this officer that just yelled at this piece of crap to that officer over there. They are not the same. You need to be able to draw the distinction. You need to be able to tell the difference between something that is serious and something is like, he shouldn't have done that, but it's not the end of the world. We need to make sure that we allow for things like that to happen. I think that's all I want to say about this particular incident. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.